and for the
Right. Right. We have read his
world. Somebody who, Mhm.
read his biography, autobiography, and both his and Michelle Obama's. So I think they are the centerpiece of my study and really absolutely love their story. And I think you being US would definitely consider him as the first person comes to your mind when you want to
Mhm.
meet. Right. I'm sure you will get a chance to meet him because you are in that space. You work with this kind of. You would get to meet. Hello and welcome. Welcome once again to my youth channel, Say Something with Mads. Today, I have a special guest. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. Here is Aaron Shan for you. But before we start the interview, I would like to say that I have been following his work. He does some amazing work. He is into conflict resolution and he is a youth change maker, so we have a lot to talk, and this interview has been pending between us for a longest period of time because of the time constraints, but I'm extremely happy on this very auspicious occasion of Diwali for us Indians. I have Aaron, a young change maker, on my channel. So let's dive deep and start and talk about Aaron and who he is. Aaron, introduce yourself, your childhood, your school, your parents, siblings, and your college life, and what are the subjects you chose in college, so on and so forth. So, over to you, Aaron.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here and more than happy to introduce myself. My name's Aaron Chan, and I'm calling from Washington, D.C. I most recently served as the U.S. delegate to the Y20, which is the youth summit arm of the G20 conference, and I was a delegate for youth and democracy and governance. Just to give a little background as to my childhood and my experience, both sides of my family, so I'm half Chinese, half Korean. Both my mother, and my father emigrated to the United States when they were quite young and have spent most of their life here. So I'm a first generation student. What that means is I'm the first person in my family to attend higher education, university, and now master's degree. And I'm a second generation immigrant, meaning I'm not a direct immigrant to the country, but the child of those immigrants. So it was a very interesting and unique childhood growing up, because it's kind of that half in, half out scenario where, growing up, it was a lot of stories about what was life like in Korea or in Hong Kong, um, during my parents' childhood and their family's experience before immigrating to the United States, but also having a kind of unique lived experience in the United States as well with that background, because a lot of the things that I was experiencing, like applying for colleges or doing standardized testing, was completely new to my parents, and kind of rely on maybe cousins or family friends. And so it was definitely a unique experience, but definitely made me stronger at the end of the day.
And what about your siblings? Do you have any siblings, or you are a lone child?
It's just me. I'm the only child.
Okay, right. So, tell me, when you have you're born here and you are educated here in US, do you go back to your roots and visit Korea sometimes? Do you have anybody still there, or Hong Kong?
So most of my family on my Korean side is here in the United States. About, I would say, half of my family is still in Hong Kong. I try and visit when I can, but from the United States to East Asia is quite a long trip. So I think the last time I was there was 2014 in the
Oh,
summertime. So it's been quite a bit of time since I was last able to visit. But we do try and go when we can.
right, right. Because I've been to Korea and I really love that country,
Oh
Japan
yeah,
too.
it's beautiful.
Yeah, true. Okay, so let's talk now about your education and your interest in international affairs. So, what were your subjects in college?
Yeah, so my college experience, so I went to UCLA as an undergrad,
Wow.
and at UCLA, I wasn't sure. I had always been surrounded by the international affairs, I guess, topics, because when you talk about immigration, when you talk about flows of people, you invariably run into, why did my grandparents have a difficult time moving to the United States? Or what was the situation like, geopolitically in the area that caused people to move around and be either internally displaced or then decide to make that move to emigrate to another country. And so
Mm,
I had always been surrounded by it. The stories I'd heard from both my mother and father's side growing up heavily
mm,
interested me in the topic of international affairs. But I
mm.
wasn't sure kind of where in the international, it's very broad, right? International affairs is just everything, but at the next level of
Yes.
international
Mm.
countries dealing with one another. And so I'd always been interested in it, but not sure if I wanted to go more business or more public policy or international policy. So I did a couple of years of economics, decided it wasn't quite for me, and then started moving in the international development and security space for the end of my degree.
Okay, so tell us, what did you learn as a complete layman, not exposed to this subject at all in India? So,
Mhm.
what would a student be learning during the college time? What are the things which covers during the subject which you have chosen, which is not available to many people in India, and many listeners, I think, across the globe don't have the
Mhm.
opportunity. But I personally am very interested in global affairs. I've been teaching this subject called global politics to the students. So
Mm.
I would like to know what are the things which are covered during this. How long was the course? Is it a 3 year course, 2 year? What is it? How many years?
So I did my degree was called Global Studies, and at UCLA, Global Studies is a completely free degree. So there's only three classes that we need to take that are mandated by the school. And
Okay,
then the rest of the courses you can build however you like. So I
okay.
had people who did like civic engineering and environmental studies, and they did a lot of engineering and law courses. I did more political science and international affairs courses, which is kind of how that
Mm,
track got started. And so it was really a conglomeration of whatever you like for what you want to study, which as an undergrad is kind of a daunting task.
mm,
I have a picture of um, I used to write down every class that I could take, and I would have to go through one by one and see if it was something I was interested in. And then if I was interested in it, would there still space in the class for me to take it, and what
mm,
time of the year? So it was a very intensive process. But
mm,
essentially, to make a long story short, international affairs is the study of how countries interact with each other. And so through that lens, you learn, especially as an American, you kind of learn the American perspective of what is foreign policy, what is international relations. So you learn the different mechanisms of what generates foreign policy in the United States. So whether it's from Congress, which is, a lot of groundswell from the communities in the United States, which then contact their members. It can be from the presidential arena as well. It can be from, the president having an agenda for something else and doing executive orders or mandating Congress to enact initiatives through the State Department. So there's so many different avenues, and that's just in the international policy world. Um, Obviously, I'm leaving out law. I'm leaving out business. I'm leaving out, there's so many different things. As I said,
uh-huh.
it's everything under the sun. It's just more complicated.
Now, tell me about how your interest, what you understand, if I say by that conflict resolution. So, what
Yeah.
is it that you learned about? And in today's scenario around the world, so what does, in a broader sense, conflict resolution mean to you after being in the field? Give some examples, and
Mhm.
also in the micro level, at the level of your own personal journey. What is conflict resolution? Conflict resolution, I think, is everywhere, right? Right from your personal relationship to everywhere in the bigger part of the
Yes.
world, conflict resolution
Yes.
is there. So, how would you describe this word, and from your work perspective as well as your personal life?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great question. I think, as you mentioned, conflict is all around us. my mom has a great definition of conflict, which is anytime two people get together, because even as similar as you are, even if you're neighbors, right, there's going to be one thing that you don't agree with,
Yes.
and that can lead to conflict. Conflict, isn't necessarily always negative, right? For instance, here in the United States, the civil rights movement was a conflict between people who were marginalized communities or didn't have rights, and they had to struggle through conflict, protest, to gain those civil rights. Same with the women's suffrage movement here in the United States. So conflict is not always a negative thing. I think in today's news environment, we think of conflict. When we think of conflict, we think of violence, we think of maybe terrorism, intrastate conflicts, right, is usually with violent armed groups. So I worked with the United States Institute of Peace during my graduate degree, and they have a great definition, which is it's an inevitable aspect of human interaction when two or more groups or individuals pursue mutually incompatible goals. And so
Wow,
essentially what that is kind of
that is a
based off of
beautiful
my mom's
definition.
definition. It's a
Yeah,
great definition.
great
And it
definition.
essentially, yeah, and it essentially is just trying to channel those divergences of incompatible goals and try and bridge that gap to the point where they can be processed into a resolution that's agreeable for everybody. And I think that's very important in today's day, in today's kind of atmosphere around the world. Um,
Right.
but yeah, 10 years out is a long time, I think. If I were to make a wish and see it happen and manifest it, kind of as it were, in 10 years, I would love to be, kind of one of the departmental heads for policy at the State Department.
Um,
Mhm.
so I would like to go back and ask you about your initiative with the youth organization and the representation of how did you apply for the what is the backstory of how did you get selected to represent US and the youth summit
Mhm.
in India? What how does
Mhm.
this work? From you are selected among five youth, right, representing US in Y20.
That's
how,
correct.
how Okay,
Mhm.
so do you have to go through do you have to send an application, or your work previously counts? How do you get selected?
Yeah, great question. It's different for every country, so I'll just kind of walk you through the US. So, um, when it comes to selecting delegations, every country is different. Some countries are selected through their foreign ministries. So, for example, Turkey, Mexico, their funding is through the government, and the government sends a delegation who's selected from various applicants. Here in the United States, we work through the United Nations Young Professionals in Foreign Policy Network, which is a
Okay.
civil society organization that's in charge of essentially organizing the delegations, prepping them, getting them ready to be sent off for negotiations at the Y7 and Y20 summits, respectively. And so it's a kind of a mixture of everything you were talking about before, right? So it's an application that you submit. You include your resume in there, your previous work. They ask for policy proposals because it's very policy forward, for the Y20 and Y7 summits. So you have to have a good policy idea and a reasonable way to implement it. And then
Mm,
through that, you go through rounds of interview processes as well. So you'll go through a couple of rounds of interviews. And once the final selection is made, they make an announcement. For Y20, it was at the end of last year. So I think I found out in December or January. Um, but I had been doing a lot of work on the youth side of things. Keep selecting candidates track, because I used to work on Capitol Hill for Senator Duckworth, and so I was building a internship program for her office. So that means I was collaborating with all Democratic offices to build a internship program so the interns could get to meet each other, get to learn from each other, network. Um, and I was also providing workshops for job acquisition skills, resume writing,
Oh, wow.
things to kind of give that value add to a lot of young professionals who are looking to either break into the space or just gain a good experience of work and then take that into whatever field of study they wanted to go to next. So through that kind of avenue, they knew about my work and knew about me, and I, I think that really helped with the.
What is it that, other than your professional life, what do you
Mhm,
do on a regular basis? Are you attached to some NGO, or what kind do you do service to the society? In what form you do it, and when did you start? Does it come from your parents also, or your school, or somewhere? Where did this seed of helping
mhm,
others, socially being aware, and giving,
mhm.
especially service mentality, comes from?
Yeah, yeah. I have to say I credit my personal draw to public service from my family. My family's very service oriented. My uncle-in-law served in the military. Both my mother and my close family, they all are very service minded. And
Mm,
so it was kind of a natural fit for me, but I think it was influenced a lot by my own personal experiences. As you meant, as we talked about earlier, and I found it quite difficult because there didn't seem to be a lot of communication to people who were applying for college of what the best way to apply was, what were strategies that you could do, and then that kind of continued forward into graduating or being in grad school during COVID-19. I tried to find as many resources as I could, but as a singular person without a network, right, it's very difficult to find the information that's necessary. And
mm,
so, as a first generations can make this situation better. We can make this community better. We can make just overall the environment for young professionals better. And
mm,
so as I continued forward and found jobs and found resources, I started joining other youth mentorship groups for young professionals. So whether that be college students or graduate students or Asian Native Hawaiian Pacific Island population, because that's what resonates with me and my family. But there's all sorts of different organizations out there. But it was really fueled by a desire to make things easier for the people who come after me, and kind of as much as I struggled, I want the next person who follows in my footsteps to have to struggle that much less, and kind of
mm,
pave the way forward so that everybody has equal opportunity to access
mm. Right.
that are out
Amazing.
there.
Right.
Mhm,
My next question to you would be, if there is one chance given to you to
mhm.
make this world a better place, what would that one thing you would like to change? I know you are doing a lot on the ground, but it's just that, supposing you got a one wish and you just wish that I can do anything. So that one thing would be something which you think will be of great impact. What would that be?
I think for me, a lot of the work that I've been doing recently has been focused on climate change and its impact, not just on youth, but really in all aspects across the world, whether you work in energy, whether you are worried about food security. It just really is starting to impact all aspects of life. I can say not that we solve climate change, but that the world unifies in very strong, powerful, proactive action to address climate change. Because right now, I think we're only on track to complete 14% of the UN Sustainable Development Goals,
Only
and
14%?
we've hit the 1 Celsius mark this year in terms of global temperature, and so we're really running into the warning indicators that climate change is real and that global warming is having very profound impact on strong and proactive policies to address it.
I expected this, but yes, the reason you said is like we are just as you said, 14%, we have not even reached any measurable difference. No, we haven't made, in spite of so many years of just talk, talk, talk. How many actually ground level work is being done is very difficult now to reach that goal. Definitely, we have to move it ahead 2050. Uh, yeah. So, and it's a personal question now to you. What is
Mhm.
that one skill you think you still need to develop? If I've given a choice that I need to develop this skill within me, which I want to, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a great one. I think for me personally, I would have to say improving my writing abilities. Um,
Okay.
when I was younger, my parents definitely told me, writing, being able to communicate clearly through writing was so important. And being a kid, I was like, oh, it's fine. I could just write to send. But as I continue on in the workforce and I continue to do advocacy and engage with youth, I'm realizing more and more how important and integral it is, not just to communicate ideas and thoughts to other people, but to do so succinctly and also to understand from background. Everyone has their own kind of context. And so the biggest thing for communications, I feel, is not to not to communicate your ideas, but to avoid misunderstanding, right? Because that causes a dissonance between yourself and your audience. So that's something that I'm still working on. I think is critically important, not just for young professionals who are looking for jobs, right? When I was going through applications for our internship program, one thing that I always checked for was correct spelling, good grammar, good syntax. But at the next level above, can you communicate your ideas to me well? Can they show the passion and inspiration that you have for your subjects, for your career, to really want me to take a chance and hire you, right? So that's something I feel like is at all.
My another question to you would be, what you think is your greatest strength? You think that's my USP, that's my strength, and what is one thing
Mhm.
which you think that, okay, I need to overcome this? That's something which is limiting me in your characteristic, in your personal life, in your personality. What do you think is your strength and one weakness?
I think for me, as I mentioned before, my family kind of instilled with me a very strong sense of service, of self-sacrifice, and along with that comes a strong sense of empathy. I think for me, it's why I'm so passionate about my work. It's why I um, drive so hard and care so much about
Mm,
the results for youth, the results for the rest of the world, so that we have a sustainable and livable world here in the future. And so I think for me, I would say my empathy is, I think, my greatest strength, because if it's a concern that I care about, if it's a topic that I am heavily passionate about, I can work, endlessly if I feel like I'm making that positive difference, if I feel that I'm changing lives for the better. I could work until I died to do that thing. And I think that's also probably my greatest weakness too, is when it comes to international policy, when it comes to public policy, there's no perfect strategy. There's no magic bullet for anything, right? There will be, in whatever policy you develop, some losers and some winners. And so it's having a removal from that. My mentor at USIP, she said it's always important to have, a soft heart, a warm heart, but hard hands to do the work, because we should never stop caring about the work that we do or the people whose lives we impact, particularly in the public policy or foreign policy space. But I think there also has to be a measure of, you know, not thinking about every
practicality.
life.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
exactly. So
Mm.
I think that's kind of the inflection point for
Yeah.
me, is kind of goes both ways.
I think that's amazing, the way that one thing can sometimes work against you in kind of your work you are
Hmm.
doing. you get too attached. And I think it's very understandable. So you beautifully picked up that one thing which could be two sides of a same coin. You can see the way sometimes it can work to your advantage, but sometimes it can be a disadvantage also. And the line which you said, you could have a warm heart, but a strong hand, right? Somebody said to you,
Mhm.
amazing. That's a fantastic line. I think that could be the tagline of the show.
Great. I'm glad we found it.
That's awesome. And if I have to
Yes.
tell you that this is has been something different than my other interviews, because I've really known about the kind of work, kind of background you have, and what is
Mhm.
your real passion of working towards conflict resolution. And I could see that when you were narrating those incidents, that how much you are into it, and you're doing some great job. And I wish that yes, you continue meeting your idols in future, and then we will continue talking. But before we end, I would just ask you to sum up the whole journey of this interview, and just end it with a quote maybe, or your life philosophy on which your core value of something rests. What is your philosophy of life? Let's end it on that note.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Before we finish, I want to thank you for this opportunity. This has been, like you said, a wonderful conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think I guess my life philosophy is something that I thought of when I was much younger when I was studying. But it's nothing is predetermined or inevitable. And essentially what that means is, you know, throughout all of history, we have these points, these people, these moments that we say, well, without this, this would have never been possible, or that would have never have happened. I respectfully disagree. I think, humans continue to adapt, improvise, change, overcome. And so with that, I think that there's always going to be movement. And I think, especially for youth today, now, there's so many things that climate change, politics, whatever, can get you feeling down, get you feeling like your voice doesn't matter, your power doesn't matter, your work doesn't matter. But I always say, you know, there's nobody who's saying that. There's always that opportunity for forward movement, and just never give up, right?
Mhm.
It's possible because we care. And if we
Mhm.
stop caring, that's really the end of
Right. And a small ripple, if we can create, is enough to make it big wave in the future. So, but we have to throw
Mhm.
that stone in the sea to see the ripple. I think very well said, very thought provoking, and really an amazing interview. Thank you, Aaron, for being here today. And with this, we wrap up this week's talk. And I hope I had such fun talking to him. And when you listen to him, you will know more about who Aaron is. And please subscribe to my channel. And next week, we get another change maker from another part of the world for you. Keep doing your bit for the planet, because we have only one earth, and each one of us can do a little bit, as Aaron says, and as all of us should be able to do that. Thank you once again. See you next week. And for now, good night and bye bye. Thank you, Aaron, for being here
Thank
today.
you. Of course. Bye bye.